I'm so thrilled to have Honorable Minister Dr. Ramokgopa, the Minister of the Department of Electricity and Energy. Thank you so much for your time and for being here.
No, thank you very much for extending the invitation. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, South Africa has embarked on bold reforms to address the years of load shedding and grid instability. What immediate progress have you seen from liberalizing the energy market and fast tracking the private sector's participation?
Well, first is that I think policy certainty is a key ingredient to any successful program. So the president initiated what we call the Energy Action Plan on the back of our electricity crisis, as you have correctly mentioned. And part of that action plan meant that we needed to introduce new players on the generation side because hitherto we had a monopoly on the generation side and also transmission, namely ESCOM, which is our state-owned enterprise. ESCOM went through a number of governance challenges, and as a result, undermined our ability to generate sufficient to meet the demand, and in so doing, also affected the performance of the South African economy. So the president was of the view that I think it's important that we learn from other jurisdictions across the world where you are de-risking yourself from a monopoly. You introduce players so that first there's competition. Secondly, there's likely going to be greater levels of investment in R&D because the nature of competition is that you want to be the least cost provider, and ultimately it might result in lower electricity prices for the consumer. So yes, we have seen those changes, but what we thought we must do is that we must codify them in legislation. And then we went to the principal piece of legislation in the electricity sector, namely the Electricity Regulation Act, and we made the necessary amendments. So those amendments is such that we are going to introduce new players. We're going to ensure that there's a wholesale market in the country. We are going to ensure that the ESCOM, the value chain, is broken. You have an entity that is responsible for generation, one responsible for transmission, and one responsible for a distribution. And in that way, there's a transparency in price determination, and therefore you are able to account for every proposed tariff increase. And as a result of transparency, you ensuring that there's going to be an efficient producer of electricity, transmitter, and distributor. And net effect, in theory, would be that you are going to stem at the least the exponential rise of electricity prices, and then over time, I think we are going to, in real prices, you'll see electricity prices coming down. So yes, we have seen tremendous progress. Of course, it's at its nascent stage. I think we're the only one on the continent who have been that bold enough to go through the kind of reform. Of course, we need to manage the pace and scale because the industry and the country might not be ready for a much more aggressive intervention. But the net result is we're moving in the right direction. Mm.
And the unbundling of ESCOM and opening transmission infrastructure to independent power producers marks a structural shift in South Africa's power sector. How do you envision this reshaping the country's electricity landscape over the next few years?
So the idea, if you like, the rationale for expanding and modernizing our transmission is born out of the fact that the areas, the geographic areas in the country that accounts for the healthiest amount of renewables is the coastal areas, the Northern Cape, Western Cape, and the Eastern Cape. But what we know is that historically, the generation in the country is in the northeast, and this renewable energy resources are on the south of the country, and the load, of course, came closer to where the generation is, and as a result, there's very little minimum transmission capacity in the south where we have these renewable energy resources, and therefore we needed to bolster the transmission so that we can be able to benefit from the renewable energy sources. So in this way, we felt that did our computation and suggests that we need to build about 14,000 kilometers of new transmission lines. But of course, the ESCOM balance sheet is weak. The sovereign balance sheet also can accommodate the scale of the investment. Where in our own calculations, we need upwards of 25 billion US dollars. So we've gone to the market to invite private sector players, almost concessioning the lines. The technical aspects of the lines. So the providers will be responsible for the technical performance of the lines, including construction and financing. And of course, we concession that over a period of time, and then it reverts back to the state. I must say that the first phase of the program, of course, starting small, of course, will scale up just 1,160 kilometers. We will unlock about 3,200 megawatts of renewable energy and capacity that is trapped now. So it's stranded electrons. So those is a low-hanging fruit. We have seen an insatiable appetite. I mean, the response by the market has been overwhelming, and so it shows that we are moving in the right direction. And of course, in the course of doing that, we'll be designing a template for fellow Africans on how to manage the kind of reforms that we are introducing. Will have the last move advantage. They'll have the first move advantage on the continent. When they come the rest of the continent, they'll have a last move advantage in that they will not repeat our mistakes. Because I mean, in doing, you are not guaranteed that everything will go the way that you want it to be. So yes, I mean, the long and short is that we're moving in the right direction, and the market has demonstrated confidence in this program.
And I'm so glad you mentioned investments. Investor interest in South Africa's power and gas markets has been growing, like you've mentioned. What are the government's top priorities in ensuring that the capital translates into sustainable and reliable energy infrastructure?
Well, first, I mean, the point I made earlier on is to ensure that there's policy certainty. I think on the back of our independent power producer program, which started around 2010, we've been able to illustrate that we are able to stay the course. What we announce is credible, and that's why that the process has matured. So I think it's important that you put the building blocks in place for private sector to come in and participate. So yes, I think what we are beginning to see is that there's a big, a deep liquidity that's sitting with the private sector. If there's an insatiable appetite to participate in programs of this nature, I think what also works for us is that we've got a relatively matured financial sector, an advanced engineering sector. So there's a concentration of skills on the technical side that is available in the country, co-sponsoring of this project by our domestic commercial banks, including the DFI. So really, you are able to de-risk the project because you'll be able to crowd in other players, essentially syndicate the financing instrument and ensure that the risk are appropriately allocated. For our part as government, make sure that the permitting and licensing is in place. We have truncated the process of getting the environmental impact assessment, water impact studies. We ensuring that we do what we call late stage tender projects. By that I mean all those permitting and licensing are in place. We've got the right of way in the example, in the instance of the program on the transmission. So in that way, you are de-risking the project. So the state has got a big role to play, and private sector will follow. I think that's something that we have experienced, and like I said, I mean, there's a huge confidence in the program, and we have no intention of letting anyone down. And what that does is going to help us to structurally reconstitute the aggregate energy mix in the country. So you're going to see more and more renewables coming on board, and of course becoming greener, cleaner. Of course, you're still going to maintain your base load, in our instance coal a big part of that conversation. So yes, I mean we're moving in the right direction.
Mm. And just looking at the integrated resource plan and the renewable energy master plan, which emphasizes solar, wind, and battery storage, how is the government working with the private sector to scale up these technologies at speed?
The first is that there has to be confidence in the program itself. One of the things that we have learned from our independent power producer program is that when you stop the program, then there's a hiatus, and then you come much later. You're undermining the ability of private sector to increase capacity utilization, to make the kind of investments that are necessary for local manufacturing and production. And that stands, if you like, the industrialization potential on the back of this program. So what we will do now, having learned from that, is that it must be a seamless procurement of a new generation capacity so that there's no interruption and you are able to broaden the flow of industrialization. On the back of that, you get people into jobs, you grow the South African economy, there's more returns to the revenue, tax revenue of the country, then you are able to reallocate that additional income to other pressing needs, especially your social infrastructure or assets. So yes, I think that it is important that all of those things are in concert for the program to succeed. But the long and short is that you are able to industrialize and grow the economy on the back of such a big intervention in the form of what we do now, a transmission rollout. We've seen it on the generation side. And yes, we'll unveil the latest version of the IRP. You'll see that we're even more ambitious in relation to the share of renewables. Wind and solar and battery is becoming a key part of that. And of course, we're making the requirements that there should be localization content, because there's another ambition. So it's not about delivering the electrons only, it's about growing the South African economy. It's about exploiting our mineral endowments, which are key to the manufacturing or production of some of the key components that are associated with the solar panels, the wind towers, the magnets inside the wind towers, the manufacturing of the batteries. So it's a big part of our agenda in the countries.
And, beyond renewables, South Africa is positioning itself to be a hub for green hydrogen. What role do you see hydrogen playing in the country's broader energy transition and industrial growth strategy?
No, you're absolutely correct. I think we're foregrounding the potential of green hydrogen. Of course, it's not yet cost competitive. I think it costs about $2 per kilogram. You really want to take it down to be $1 per kilogram, then you are in the game. But what we know is that we've got almost an unassailable advantage as a country. Like I said, the Northern Cape Corridor, we've got some of the best quality radiation. Secondly, we've got huge amounts of real estate. So this is unoccupied land that is not competing with other commercial uses. And thirdly, is that the technology is proven in our country. Sasol, one of our marquee private sector companies, is already using the Fischer-Tropsch technology for purposes of manufacturing gray hydrogen. Is gray because it's manufactured from using coal. It will go to blue using gas. We want to make it green using renewable energy assets. At some point, we will grow our nuclear program, we'll make it pink. But what's the point I'm making is that it's got a huge, huge future. You will see that in our IRP, the integrated resource plan, we're lifting the potential for green hydrogen. But of course, there are other markets in the world that are prepared to pay the premium. The Japanese, in particular, the Europeans will be with the president in the EU just to see their appetite when Ursula von der Leyen was here during the summit of South Africa EU. they pledge about 4.9 billion euros towards a big part of that goes towards green hydrogen. So yes, we're in a good space, and we have every intention of exploiting, if you like, the inside track that we're occupying in the green hydrogen conversation.
Mm. And just my final question, we're here at African Energy Week 2025, and South Africa is spotlighting its role as a premier investment destination in Africa's energy transition. What message would you like to share with investors and regional partners who are attending the event?
Well, is that Africa's time is now, and it can be postponed. So that's one. And it will take leadership for us to be able to exploit that. So it doesn't necessarily come naturally. So I think leadership is required. So that's one. And then there has to be policy harmonization across the continent to the extent that we can. And I'm sure in some instances there's sovereign considerations. I do accept that. But at a technical specification, I think there could be policy harmonization. Thirdly, is that we are sitting on resources. We are sitting on resources. I think we must exploit those. But there are also other regions that are sitting on resources. So if we don't move fast, capital is very mobile. So it will find other places that are receptive, and they will invest there, and would have lost the opportunity. So the window is not permanent, if you like. So we must take disadvantage within the life of that opportunity. And I think that's a message we want to convey, and that there's no perfect solution. So we shouldn't wait for the most perfect solution. It doesn't exist. So I think the point is to start now, so that we're able to address energy poverty, the 600 million people who don't have access to electricity get to benefit. We stem, if you like, these fatalities that are as a result of cooking methods that are not safe. But and then more significantly, we're able to end the demographic dividend, the most youthful population of any region. So if you don't make any intervention, it can be a curse because they can revolt against the sitting government. Can be a dividend as long as we're able to open up opportunities to them. So we're in a good space. We didn't have thought of any other region to be in other than on the continent. So Africa's place and time is now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time,
Thank
Minister.
you. Thank you. All right.